Well, the ANC responds to the passing of Archbishop, and the ANC spokesperson Pule Mabe now joins us via Zoom. Apologies, I believe we've just lost Mr. Pule Mabe. We'll certainly get the team to try get hold of Mr. Mabe. Are you there with us? Good afternoon to you, sir.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, all right.
Afternoon to
a very good
afternoon
to you. A very good afternoon to you. All right, let's get some reaction then from the ANC on the passing of the Archbishop. No doubt, commonalities in the past when it comes to the ANC and the Archbishop in the fight against apartheid. Let's talk about how the ANC is reacting then today.
Well, the African National Congress is saddened by the passing of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, who was the last living Nobel Peace Prize laureate in our country. He was also a tower of moral conscience and an epitome of wisdom. He stood for human rights and campaigned for the rights of gay people, spoke against homophobia, also spoke against what Israel is doing to Palestine, because he believed in what I would call universal solidarity, especially as it comes to human rights. Here in the country, he was an anti-apartheid activist, spoke against atrocities that were meted against black people by the apartheid regime. Him and many others who were leading faith-based formation were able to close the void when political parties were banned to operate formally in the country, when some of our leaders, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Ndade Mlangeni, Dennis Goldberg, and many others were in incarceration, and others were outside South African soil, like the president of the longest serving president of the ANC, President O.R. Tambo, trying hard to convince the international community to impose sanctions on the then apartheid regime so that the people of this country could be free. So these ones, those that were leading these faith-based formations, like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, ensured that they closed that void, stood on the side of our people, continued to use churches to mobilize the rest and galvanize the rest of society against the apartheid regime. So we'll forever be indebted to people like the Ark because of the role that they played. Even when he felt that things were not all gloom and good in his own view in the African National Congress, he also spoke out in the public against those.
Mr. Mabe, actually, do you want to talk about that? In his later years, he was really quite critical of the African National Congress, and I don't remember the quote very well, but something like if the African National Congress does to you what the apartheid government did, vote them out, if I remember him saying that correctly. How did you feel about that? And actually then looking at the results of the local government elections where the ANC didn't fare as well as they would have liked, and almost as though, this was an indication of that. How did the party actually take that kind of criticism from the Arch, who obviously, in years before would have been very supportive of the African National Congress?
Sis Flo, many senior cadres, stalwarts of our struggle for liberation, do from time to time constructively criticize the ANC out in the public. The ANC takes that criticism constructively, goes back, reflects, and then say, what are the things that we need to be doing to make sure that we are still able to consolidate the confidence of our people, assure them that we are on the right trajectory. So there would have been a number of efforts undertaken by the leadership of the ANC responding to those sentiments. And part of what we would have done was to really come up with the renewal program, which ensured that we deal with what was seen out there to be moral decay. Make sure that we assure society that the men and women that we put forward to lead will be those that can put their best foot forward. One will be those that have got integrity, have got credibility, could enjoy the necessary confidence that is required out there in the public. And all of these things were coming out of this moral conscience that the ARC and others would have said, we need an ANC that moves on this kind of a path in order to be able to not shun the promise we have made when we fought for liberation.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the fact that the ANC then reflects and goes back and looks at this, what you're calling constructive criticism. But in truth and in reality, there was hardly any change after that statement. Or do you disagree with me when I say that? I mean, the fact of the matter is those issues that he was talking to at the time, and I think in particular he was talking about the issue of corruption within the ANC. I mean, we can't say that any of that has stopped. And in fact, you were punished at the polls because of that.
Well, I don't entirely agree with you, Flo. I mean, we will need to do proper research to really understand what happens at the polls. We take criticisms that come constructively and are able to work on those. There's a lot that has really happened here. I mean, now, part of what we did coming out of the Nazareth conference was to make sure that those of our cadres that are criminally charged are then asked to step aside from their own positions of leadership while their cases are still being heard in court. Should they be found to be innocent, they will then come back and occupy their own responsibilities. These are some of the things that we have been doing out there, because perhaps we need to be repeating our own message all the time to make sure that we are in sync with everyone out there in society. Don't forget this Flo, that the political landscape has also broadened in our country. I mean, there are many we now have got more political parties contesting elections than you would have had in 1994. You now have got more independents participating in these elections. It goes without saying that immediately you have got many parties and many individuals participating in elections where they want to be voted for. What you do is that you then reduce those numbers that would have been gone to parties where they few. So this also is another point that we must always talk about. In 2024, for the first time in this country, you are going to have independents having to stand for elections. What does that do? It further shrinks the support of political parties, because it means you are dividing your votes. So it is not just an issue. So we shouldn't just base election outcomes just on the conduct of political parties. We must also remember that the landscape has broadened. People are now exercising that democratic right differently. Because remember, the democratic right of an electoral process is such that Maflo can stand for elections, or Maflo can also vote for a party or individuals of their own choice. This is what the ANC of Desmond Tutu fought for people to have their own voices, to participate in the polls, to choose parties of their own choice. Now, when we go out to campaign as the ANC, not only do we encourage people to go and vote for the ANC, we also encourage them to go and vote so that they do not disenfranchise themselves. Because when they vote, regardless of who they vote for, they participate in the construct of the country of their dreams.
Let's talk about how the ANC is planning to celebrate the life of the Arch. You did mention quite significantly that he was the last remaining receiver or laureate of the recipient of the now I forgot the name of the award there, but in any case, the Nobel Peace Prize. Pardon me. Yes. Pardon me. I'm from holiday. Yeah. So in any case, the point is that we saw quite a lot in fanfare, being done for the late apartheid president in honor of him by the ANC, and one wonders if we will see the same for Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. I mean, bearing in mind, of course, he was never a president, but certainly very active when it comes to the fight for apartheid. Do we know at this stage if the ANC does indeed then have any plans in terms of celebration of the life of the Arch, and how you see that being done?
Well, of course, Maflo, I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, we will be lining up a number of memorial activities, working with our ANC structure in the Western Cape, but also encouraging all of our structures throughout the country to also hold similar events, whether virtually or physically, with numbers that would not necessarily go outside the restrictions. So we're expecting that. Tomorrow, Comrade Naledi Pando, together with the leadership of the Western Cape, will be visiting the family on behalf of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress to go and formally convey our own condolences. And of course, work with the family and the foundation, the Leah and Desmond Tutu Foundation, to be able to then say what plans are they having in place and how do we then get the ANC to be infused in that work. We are also expecting that because of the role and stature of the Archbishop, that perhaps there could also be an announcement by the state in terms of how they are going to really undertake this one. Because a person of Desmond Tutu's status is deserving of being buried formally and officially by the state in that way because of the role that he would have played. But that is not the place of the African National Congress. We leave that in the hands of the state president to make that kind of a determination. We are hoping that given the role that Utata Desmond Tutu played in the country, he is one of those that really carry the story of human solidarity, the story of justice, the story of peace, and the story of freedom. So it is that story, and even the story of morality. It is that story that makes them deserving as outstanding South Africans to really be celebrated, not just by us in the ANC, but by each and everyone who understand the meaning of freedom. Because our freedom didn't just come free. There were men and women who really had to be out there in the trenches, fighting for all of us, fighting for equality, fighting for human rights. Yeah. And amongst those was this great tower of moral conscience, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu.
Yeah. As we close off, our conversation, Mr. Mabe, I mean, I want to talk about, his legacy, and I think you've touched on quite significantly. You've articulated quite well in terms of how, we should remember him. But on that question still, it's not as though the Archbishop went without criticism. I mean, just looking at social media at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of comments regarding where some are of the view that he might have been tougher on people like Mamwini Madikizela Mandela during the very famous TRC, during that commission, and that he wasn't perhaps as tough on those who had actually, been the aggressors during apartheid, those who had killed people, where, there are some families who till today don't know where, their loved ones were buried, for example, and there was a sense that he was perhaps very light on them, and then, also came very hard on Mamwini Madikizela Mandela. So those are some of the, I'd say, some of the criticisms that are, leveled against the Archbishop that I'm also looking at, while we're also, no doubt, looking at the fact that he was very much well loved. I mean, what is your reaction to that? Because the reality is that people are having those kinds of discussions too.
Well, Flo, you see, in this country, we've got something called the Bill of Rights. It is in the Constitution. And in those Bill of Rights, there is also a significant right that even yourselves in the media enjoy, which is called freedom of speech. Yeah. So the ANC is not going to be swayed to move away from sending its condolences to the Tutu family, including celebrating the heroic role that he played in the liberation of our people through what is being said out there on social media. It's very unfortunate. When in our African culture, when people have passed on, what we do our best, because they are not there to speak for themselves, we celebrate the goodness, the righteousness that they stood for and all of that. We do that because, when a person has passed on, they are not there to speak for themselves. So we have to also maintain the dictates of our own cultural customs on how we deal with those that have passed on. So the ANC is not about to change that very value system that has actually carried it through for near 110 years. And I take it that when we celebrate our anniversary on the 8th of January next year, part of what we'll be doing will also be to celebrate the life and times of Desmond Tutu. I can assure you that there will be a section in the January 8th statement that also, dedicates our own honor to this great tower of moral conscience.
All right, Mr. Mabe, thanks very much for giving us your time then here on SABC News this afternoon.